Now that relations between Russia and Ukraine are especially tense and Russia is a trending topic, I think it is time to talk about the life and mind of Joseph Stalin, the Soviet terror, one of the most ruthless and bloodthirsty dictators in history, heir to a despotic regime. His Red Army defeated Nazi Germany during the Second World War, which made Russia expand abroad, turning it into a superpower, bringing terror and iron fist to other Eastern European countries. At least 20 million Soviets lost their lives under this regime that lasted almost 3 decades until Stalin's death. Today, we'll look at the origins and works of this man, whose name continues to arouse controversy, even after his death and after the fall of the USSR. According to the Gregorian calendar, Stalin was born on December 6, 1878. However, Stalin invented a new date of birth, December 21, 1870, and this will be the one that the Soviet people celebrated for years. Something similar he did with his paternal surname that he changed to the mythical Stalin, which in Russian means made of steel. Would this be the true origin of Iron Man? His real name was Joseph Vissarionovich Zugashvili in Gori, a small village located in what is now Georgia. He was the third and only surviving son of a shoemaker. When he was very young, he and his mother went away from his father, an alcoholic and violent man who never missed an opportunity to beat them. For many years, he and his mother lived in different towns and cities, in near poverty. His mother's highest dream was that little Joseph would become a priest. So she worked tirelessly to raise the money to send her son to the seminary. Stalin was a shy and withdrawn child. It is well said that one should beware of the quiet ones, although very intelligent and dedicated to school. In fact, he graduated at the age of 16 from high school, was among the best of his generation, and it seemed that nothing would stand in the way of his ecclesiastical career until the ideas of Marx came to him. Stalin said that his political awakening was in 1896, after the tragedy in Jodinka, an episode of mass hysteria, where the celebrations for the coronation of Tsar Nicholas II provoked a human stamp, where more than 1,300 people died and many others were injured. From there, Stalin began to lose faith in God and began to question the Tsarist government. Although he did not leave school, he joined study groups opposed to the government. All his classmates embraced Marxist and socialist ideas, and he quickly adopted them as well. After leaving the seminary, Joseph began to collaborate with the Social Democratic Labour Party. At the beginning of the 20th century, Stalin participated in different revolts and strikes against the Tsar and the Empire. On different occasions, he was imprisoned and sent to exile in Siberia, but in the end, his comrades in the party always rescued them. At that time, his duty was to collect money for the party through robberies, kidnappings and extortions. Was it a party or a Mexican drug cartel? When the revolution began, Stalin was imprisoned in a small town far from Moscow. In 1922, Lenin was confident in Stalin's power and political capacity, so he appointed him General Secretary of the party. From that moment on, Stalin was the most powerful man in the USSR, only after Lenin, of course. From this form began a chess game, whose main objective was to seize absolute power. As party secretary, he placed allies in strategic positions of the party. With this, he gradually snatched power from none other than Lenin himself, who surely already saw the problem of having Stalin at such a high level of power, because apparently, in his will, he said that he should be replaced. Upon Lenin's death in 1924, Stalin had finally eliminated each of his rivals, taking absolute control of the Communist Party, through intimidation and extortion, thus becoming the de facto dictator of the Soviet Union. If we are honest, since Lenin was alive, the design of the USSR was to be a dictatorship, and not just any dictatorship, but one of the bloodiest. What Stalin did when he came to power was to perfect that machinery that had already begun to feed on terror and blood. Although in appearance Stalin was a legitimate heir, he could only come to power after getting rid of some enemies and political opponents such as Trotsky, who had to flee to Mexico. Perhaps for this reason, he felt the need to destroy any hint of opposition he might suggest both within the party and among society, for he could lose that position which did not correspond to him at all. Stalin's goal was the control of the entire economy by the state. One of the activities that was most affected first was agronomy, as Stalin ordered to take control of all the land and beware of anyone who refused to give their land to the state because they were shot or sent into exile. In the end, this practice caused a widespread famine, which ended up killing millions of Russians. Stalin established a cult to his person. In short, these tyrants are cult with the same sizers, because this sounds to me. Stalin ruled mercilessly, eliminating any human being who crossed him and opposed the laws. The government controlled every media. Russians had no information other than the party's own. It began with a push to eliminate the opponents, which seemed more like a witch hunt because it gave special powers to the police called Cheka, and motivated the citizens to spy on each other, to inform on any suspect. He established a Great Purge, a series of strategies to cleanse the Communist Party, army and other spheres of public life, of all those who did not agree with his policies. The tension between Russia and Ukraine is not new. In fact, during Stalin's rule, Ukraine experienced one of its worst periods, with such famine and repressions that it seems that Stalin had set himself the goal of wiping out the Ukrainian population. The inhabitants remember these years as the Holodomor, which combines the word Holod, famine, and Mor, extermination. It all began with the collectivization of the countryside. By 1930, the Kremlin forced the peasants to deliver all the wheat for export. They took the seeds so fast that they did not leave enough time for them to germinate, nor did they leave seeds for replanting. As a good authoritarian, he ordered to kill anyone who opposed to deliver the wheat. Of course, the population carried to the extreme began to steal the wheat. Many were imprisoned, but when the prisons were filled, most were sentenced to death, to work in the gulags in Siberia. The result of these policies was 5,000 people dead, or at least that is what is recorded. Even so, Russia still needed the Ukrainians, since Ukraine supplied them with 60% of the wheat, 80% of the coal, 100% of the iron needed in the rest of the USSR. They say that great minds think alike, and unfortunately, so do sick minds, because Hitler was not the only one who developed torture camps disguised as labor camps. Stalin set up a series of collective labor camps, called gulags, where about 2 million people died and 10 million more were interned. As Stalin grew older, he became increasingly paranoid. Some call it karma. He believed that the doctors were trying to kill him and senior politicians, so he began a persecution that became known as the Doctor Conspiracy. Finally, Stalin died of a cerebral hemorrhage on March 5, 1953 at the age of 75. His body was placed in a grave next to Lenin's in Moscow, so he managed to continue to anger Lenin in the afterlife. Stalin did not know the word compassion. In his last years, power took its toll on him. He saw conspiracies in everyone, even in the most faithful Bolshevik, and he may have been right as it is said that on his deathbed there was no one to call a doctor, or at least not until after several hours, as if they were waiting for the death of the leader. With Stalin, there are 3 communist leaders who have attacked their own people, but the main problem is that they came to power without any kind of counterweight. This made them believe that they could dispose of human lives without any consequences. Thank you all for watching this video and watch me every day on the Reels.